This is your online lecture for learning communities in the classroom for social studies for the child. We're specifically talking about learning communities and how we can implement strategies for including all children. Just kind of to preface this topic a little bit, as teachers, we need to remember that how we set up our learning community in the classroom provides so many life applicable lessons for our students. If you think about the rules that you set up in your classroom, or how we live in community and harmony with each other, or how we learn about each other's differences and celebrate those. All of those are done in a strong learning community, and if once we start looking into social studies curriculum, we can really see that those partner really well with each other. I will tell you that no amount of funding or textbooks or curriculum or resources can produce this learning community magic. The only person that can do that is the teacher in the classroom, and the teacher has to be a really strong teacher to make this happen. So just think about that this learning community is maybe the most important part of the social studies curriculum, and that's why we're starting with it before we move any more forward in this idea of social studies in the classroom. If we don't have a strong learning community, then everything else is kind of be void. So as we're going through, let's look at what our graphic organizer looks like. I know that this is on page 12 by looking at the table of contents in the beginning of my notebook, and I'm going to label learning communities up top. Just underneath that, I am going to write describe your ideal learning community, because that's the last thing you're going to do before you flip this slide. And then I've given that about 5 spaces. And then after that, I've given that about like 7 more spaces, and I've put 4 steps for creating a learning community, and I have divided that into 4 different areas because there's 4 steps for that. Underneath that, what is cooperative learning we're going to be talking about, and then specifically what is Kagan structures. So you can see how that's divided. I know where this lecture is going, and I know what you have to do. So go ahead and take a moment to set up your notebook to look just like that. And then before you go on to the next slide, I want you to describe your ideal learning community in text. Don't give me pictures. I just want text for that. Tell me what it looks like, what it feels like, things that have already just popped into your brain from the first slide when I talked about it a bit. Moving on, you are going to draw pictures and have text, but please remember that it needs to show understanding, that you've synthesized the information, and include color. The reason for this in an interactive notebook system is because as you are writing and drawing, you're reviewing it once, and then as you're adding color, that is going back and reviewing it, and so it sticks in your brain just a little bit more. So go ahead, fill out this page. Set up the organization, and then specifically fill out the describe your ideal learning community. Pause me and then come back. So as we are talking about launching a learning community, there are 4 things that I want you to remember, and I don't want you just to write these 4 sentences in those 4 little boxes. I want you to think about each one, pause in between each one, and then illustrate which one these 4 steps look like. So the first one is formulating overall classroom goals specific to social education learning community. So as I am setting up this learning community, I am going to develop these classroom goals before my students even get to me on the first day of the school, or before I even go into my classroom and start moving furniture around for the first time. I am, as a teacher and the leader of the learning community, deciding what is important and what is not important, what things that you're going to value and then in turn make sure the students value, and what things that you're going to make sure that you have purposeful discussions with those students. So that first one is, the first step is formulating your overall classroom goals. Now, not with anything else, but just when it comes to that learning community. So that is your first illustration. Your second one says focus on the physical environment. So once you set those goals, then you can start moving stuff around. Focus on the physical environment, creating and maintaining a classroom climate that features shared responsibility, promotes tolerance and appreciation for diversity, and provides the support needed for the realization of intended learning outcomes. So how you set the desk up in your room, where you put the bookcases, where your desk is there natural light? Is there plants? Is there interactive bulletin boards? What about technology? All of those things is your classroom climate when it comes to the physical environment. So what decisions are you going to make sure that physical environment is reflective of those classroom goals that you created in step one? Things that we want to remember, that we want to make sure it promotes tolerance, okay, that we're being accepting of each other. And that even means student to teacher and teacher to student, and then, of course, student to student. And appreciation for diversity. What are you going to do in your classroom to appreciate the diversity of everyone? If you don't make a specific goal to do so or address it in a certain way, it'll just get ignored. And by you ignoring it is showing that, that you do not appreciate the diversity of your students. And then, of course, provides the support needed for the realization of intended learning outcomes. So I want them to be able to commune and talk to each other and learn from each other. And also, how can I make sure that everything else can happen and all the other maybe more academic learning outcomes can happen from that. So that's how you're going to illustrate point 2. For number 3, you're going to establish rules, norms, roles, and procedures. So you want your class to be able to establish these with you, but this is not going to be the first time that you think of them. So before the first day of school, before that you work through this with your new class, you should on your own establish the rules that you want your classroom to have. What is normal? What things are allowed to happen? And that ties directly to procedures. What are you going to be okay with? I wouldn't say that there is one rule over the other or one procedure over the other. That's just really, honestly, what you're going to be able to permit, what things that they're going to be able to do without driving you crazy, that you're going to be okay with. I know that we've talked about sometimes that I would like throw things at the kids and have them catch it. That was a norm for me that I was okay with. I was okay with them talking without raising their hand, but I was not okay with them getting up and sharpening their pencil. So those are just norms and procedures that is just based on you as an individual person being a teacher. For those roles, what is your role in the classroom? Are you the all-knowing train conductor? Are you the one that all information comes through? What's the roles of the students? Are they just to sit in their seats and to collect the information that you're throwing at them? Or do you have different roles that you intend to play for yourself and for your students? So think about all of those things, and we'll talk about it throughout the semester, but that goes into launching that learning community, again, before the students even get there. I will say that for number 3, establish rules, norms, roles, and procedures, I always knew what I wanted all of these to be. And just like any smooth adult can do, you are going to have the conversation with your kids so they feel like they have put the input in, that this was all their idea, when in all reality, you already knew where you were leading them through for the conversation and where the destination was going to end. But you need to know that before you even start the conversation. You don't want to think of it the first time while you are discussing with them in the classroom. So the 4th step is, as a class, create a vision for how all of this will function. So you have thought about goals before they even got there. Then you focus on the physical environment. Then you thought about and established rules, norms, roles, and procedures. And then at the very end, you are going to, as a class, create a vision for what you see throughout the classroom. throughout the year. How are they going to be learning? What role are they going to be taking? It's really important that even with the older kids, it might seem a little fluffy to do this and it might sound a little silly, but it is really important on creating your classroom climate. By you giving something attention, you're showing that it is important, and you might be the first teacher that they get to experience that says, hey, you know what? I'm interested in what you feel your ideal learning environment would be. What would make you happiest to come to school and experience what? How do we want to learn? Do we want to learn in groups? Do we want to learn individually? All the kids are going to say something different, and that's okay. But that's also a time where you can kind of assess who their personalities are, because although it confuses me, not everybody wants to learn in groups and have a big social setting. Some kids would rather just learn off on their own. Some would rather you just lecture to them all day. And so this is doing a couple different things. It's allowing you to show that their input is important to you. You are opening up that community that is led through discussion. And it's also quickly assessing the personalities of all your students. So that last one, of course, create a vision for how all of this will function. I would use graphic organizers. I would note everything that is said at specific schools and with certain ages. You can even open up something like a Google Docs and have everybody start listing their ideas and throw in some technology into that. What's really important, though, is to be careful about going too quickly with this. You should not skip from steps 1, 2, and 3 about 20 minutes before they come into school on the first day. This is something that you need to give a lot of attention to. If things change throughout the class year or the school year, or you're noticing some changes, this is something that requires some maintenance. I know that I would talk about classroom culture and who we were as a community on the very first day of school before I did anything else. That's what I would do. I would always hit it around Thanksgiving break when we're all getting antsy. I would hit it again when we came back in January, just to remind them, okay, you've been in your own houses, in your own communities for about 2 weeks. We're back here together. And sometimes it would be reminding them of past rules. Sometimes it would say, you know what? Let's tweak some things. Let's talk about how we should do some things different. You can spin that in a number of different ways. One way could be you've all grown since August or September, and so I'm expecting you to be more independent learners, or I'm expecting you to be able to handle more responsibility. It could be, okay, we had a really shaky fall. Let's put some more structure into the day. But again, this, like everything else, is going to require constant maintenance about ideas and expectations that can be had in the classroom. Make sure that you have drawn illustrations for step 1, 2, 3, and 4, and again, add color. So go ahead and pause me and then come back when you are ready to talk about cooperative learning. Okay, so cooperative learning works well in the social studies classroom, typically because it is based on group work. And when we work together, we are crossing ethnic interactions, which is always encouraged. We are learning from each other. We're learning how we are different. We are learning how we are the same. Some democratic classroom type of thoughts are going to come in. What happens when we work with someone that maybe isn't pulling their weight or breaks the rules? How do we learn to work with someone that that we don't get along with? I believe in one of the videos that you're about to watch, they talk about, and maybe even your text, they talk about don't group students together that don't get along well. I differ in that opinion. I think with enough maintenance and with enough kind of guidance, they should learn how to work with people that they don't get along with, because that's what happens in the rest of their lives. And so cooperative learning is present in a lot of social studies strong curriculums. So let's look at this. It says, once a strong community has been established, so once you've done all of your 4 steps for creating this learning community, your students are ready to begin cooperative learning. Different groups for every subject, every project. So if you are a classroom teacher that teaches all the subjects, you are going to have different groups for everything. You're going to have different groups for math and language arts, maybe for word study words, for reading ability, for writing ability, and then in social studies. And definitely in science. For social studies, though, you might have a group that you use just for maybe like a think, pair, share. And then you are going to change that group if you are doing a jigsaw group. Those terms will make more sense to you within the next week. But these groups are nothing that you set in stone and say, well, this is your group. Part of the greatness of cooperative learning is, hey, if this group is not fantastic to you right now, you're going to be in a different group soon. So you need to make this work and learn how to deal with these people because you will not be with them forever. That third point there, it teaches the processes of cooperative learning in stages. And so just like anything else, if we're teaching something that requires a lot of skills and a lot of steps, you're going to model everything. So let's say on the first day of school that you have talked about learning communities and you set it up. On the second day of school, you're not putting them in groups and saying go. You are showing them what this looks like. So the first maybe time or 2 or 3 when you are presenting a cooperative learning and these specific groups and activities that they're going to do, you're going to do it together as a class and you are going to model what that looks like. You're also going to model what happens when something goes wrong, because it will, and so then they will know, well, how do I respond? Because you don't want them responding, it didn't work, we're raising our hands and needing attention from you. You want them to be able to problem solve when they're in these cooperative groups. As you go through, something to remember is that your role is a silent guide. Once you have set them up and you've shown them what this looks like and you've shown them how to manage conflict and how to resolve that, your job is a silent guide. Your job is not to sit back in your chair and think, oh, everything's going great. Your job is to circulate around the room. At this time, you could be collecting some assessment measures. You could be seeing how certain groups are interacting with each other, how certain students are getting along, what type of comments that they're making. A great idea is to take Post-it notes and have, as you're walking around, put a kid's name on a Post-it note. I like the way you said this. And then at the end, give it to them. If you are going up and you're saying things to them, they're going to expect for you to conversate with them, and it's going to throw off their whole rhythm. And so it's always nice to give specific feedback, but not always while they're doing their cooperative learning. Let me see what I'm missing. Of course, you are never going to put kids in a group of more than 5 students. I think we can all experience that. As soon as you get over 5, things get really complicated. There's too many cooks in the kitchen. I would always stay around 3 and 4, and that depends on what type of personalities you have going and what the job to be done is. If you have too many people and the job is too small, someone's going to be bored. And if one of your students is bored, they're not going to like cooperative learning, they're not going to get anything out of it, and they might become a behavior problem. So that is an overall of what cooperative learning is. Make sure that you have illustrated what is cooperative learning and, of course, add color to it. Pause me and then come back. For the rest of the lecture, you're going to watch 2 videos. The first one is talking about cooperative learning strategies, and that is going to talk more about what is cooperative learning. The second video is a specific form of cooperative learning called Kagan cooperative learning, and we'll be diving more into Kagan, learning some of the structures that can be used in the social studies classroom. Most likely, if you have taken classroom management or if you have taken methods or integrating the arts. A number of different other courses uses the Kagan idea of cooperative learning. At CCU, we've adopted this in our education department because a lot of the area schools have been Kagan certified, and we want you to go into the schools having the same skills set that those teachers that are already there have. And so we do a lot with Kagan. Again, so cooperative learning, that is the front screen of that video, and then the second is that Kagan video. If you go to our module for learning community, they will be linked there, ready to go. Remember, as soon as you are finished with your Kagan video, go ahead and illustrate that portion, that's the very bottom box, and add color. When we come back on Monday, we are going to be doing some Kagan activities to kind of review that. Please make sure that you read Chapter 2 in your books and pick up or print off your SQ3R sheet. And then, of course, like last week, go ahead and take a picture of your graphic organizer, upload it to Canvas, and your SQ3R sheet that's been completed, take a picture and upload it to Canvas. Have a good weekend, everybody.